Donald Trump has said that he had no intentions of damaging Medicare and no intention of damaging Medicaid, cutting it or doing anything to harm people. But when you take a look at what they're about to do, when you take a look at the questions that Senator Cassidy gave to Robert Kennedy, it is clear that they're about to do two things: majorly cut Medicaid, and secondly, enhance Medicare to try to push everybody to private insurance when we know that Medicare Advantage is a disaster. Folks, I want you guys to be aware of this and start today calling your senators and letting them know you don't want no transition to Medicare Advantage. In fact, you want Medicare Advantage dead. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Republicans are exploring reforms to Medicaid that could help pay for Trump administration priorities. With this context, what will you do about dual eligibles?
About
dual eligibles?
Well, dual eligibles are not right now served very well under the system. Those are people who are eligible for both Medicaid and Medicare. I suppose my answer to that is to make sure that the programs are consolidated, that they're integrated, and the care is integrated. I look forward to working with you, Dr. Cassidy, on making sure that we take good care of people who are dual eligible.
And how do you propose that we integrate those programs? Does Medicare pay more, Medicare pay less, Medicaid pay more, Medicaid pay less? How do we do that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure because I'm not in there. I mean, it is difficult to integrate them because Medicare is under fee-for-service. It's paid for by employer taxes. Medicaid is fully paid for by the federal government, and it's not fee-for-service. So I do not know the answer to that. I look forward to exploring options with you.
Republicans, again, are looking at ways to potentially reform Medicaid to help, pay for President Trump's priorities, but to improve outcomes. What thoughts do you have regarding Medicaid reform?
Well, Medicaid is not working for Americans, and it's specifically not working for the target population. Most Americans, like myself, I'm on Medicare Advantage, and I'm very happy with it. Most people who are on Medicaid are not happy. The premiums are too high. The deductibles are too high. The networks are narrow. The best doctors will not accept it in the best hospitals. And particularly, Medicaid was originally designed for a target population of the poorest Americans. It's now been dramatically expanded. And the irony of the expansion is that the poorest Americans are now being robbed. Their services have dramatically decreased, even though we've increased the price of Medicare by 60% over the last 4 years. The target population is being robbed.
With that said,
other options.
Obviously, you've thought about that, and I appreciate that. What reforms do you recommend, again, that would improve services, I suppose, but also make it more cost efficient?
Well, President Trump has given me the charge of improving quality of care and lowering the price of care for all Americans. There are many things that we can do. What we want to, the ultimate outcome, I think, is to increase transparency, to increase accountability, and to transition to a value-based system rather than a fee-based system.
So
rather than a service-based system.
On Medicaid in particular, can you just kind of take those kind of general principles and apply it to the Medicaid program?
I think that there is There are many, many options with telemedicine, with AI right now. And, there's including direct primary care systems. We're seeing that movement grow across the country. There's one of the largest providers.
So going back to Medicaid though, and speaking of these specific advances, what reforms are you proposing with these ideas vis-a-vis Medicaid?
Well, I don't have a broad proposal for dismantling the program.
Of course not saying that.
I think what we need to do is we need to experiment with pilot programs in each state. We need to keep our eye on the ultimate goal, which is value-based care, which is transparency, accountability, access.
And one more thing, going back to Medicare, you mentioned you're an MA. You mentioned earlier the Medicare fee-for-service. Do you have any kind of thoughts as to whether or not patients on fee-for-service should move into MA, or how should we handle that?
Whether patients
who are on Medicare fee-for-service.
Traditional Medicare?
Yes.
Well, that's their choice right now. We have, I think, 32 million Americans, or 30 million Americans on Medicare, on traditional Medicare, and then another 34 on Medicare Advantage, roughly half and half. And I think more people would rather be on Medicare Advantage because it offers very good services, but people can't afford it. It's much more expensive. In answer to your first question, there are all kinds of exciting things that we can be doing, including cooperatives, which President Trump has supported, including health savings accounts, which President Trump has supported. But all of these things to make people more accountable for their own health.
And so we'd bring the cooperatives and the health savings accounts into Medicare and Medicaid?
Exactly. We try to increase those, the use of those, and to direct primary care, to continue to transition into a value-based program that is private. Americans don't, by and large, do not like the Affordable Care Act. People are on it. They don't like Medicaid. They like Medicare. And they like private insurance. We need to listen to what they would prefer to be on private insurance. Most Americans, if they can afford to be, will be on private insurance.
Think about what he just said. Most Americans want to be on private insurance. That's false. Most Americans hate private insurance. If you explain to them what Medicare for All would do for them, pretty much what a traditional Medicare with pretty jacked up Medicare would do for them. That's what they love. They love their Medicare. When they get the pains of having to go through the insurance companies and go through all these hoops to get service, they hate it. But Republicans and their sycophants have a way of just saying stuff, and by saying stuff, kind of willing it onto people. And people have a tendency to go back and say, I guess most Americans want it, so we coalesce. No. What this proves is that, notice what Cassidy was doing there. He was trying to enhance Medicaid. And I try to say that, what are you going to do to Medicaid? Because Donald Trump has other priorities, and to fulfill Donald Trump's priorities, how are you going to steal the money from Medicaid? Because that's about the biggest chunk that we could get stuff from. He didn't use those words, of course, but that's how he started the questionnaire. But secondly, when he starts to talk about Medicare Advantage, notice that Kennedy is like, oh, yeah, I'm on Medicare Advantage. Of course, you're probably on a primo Medicare Advantage. You are on Medicare Advantage because you're over 65, and private insurance for over 65 is Medicare Advantage if you want private insurance, right? The government is bailing even the rich people out. So let's be clear here, folks. Let's be very, very clear. The attempt here is to gut Medicare and gut Medicaid. That is the intent of how Donald Trump intends on paying for for his tax cut. And here's the kicker. Remember, they are doing this via what the process called reconciliation. I need to explain this to everybody. Reconciliation means that they don't need a 60 vote majority in the Senate. They don't need to get to cloture. They cannot be filibustered. So all they need, they can lose 2 Republican senators or 3 Republican senators and still pass a complete bill that guts Medicare and guts Medicaid. So you have a lot of work to do right now. You have to call Mitch McConnell. You got to call there are about 5 Republicans that are up for election in the next 2 years. You have got to ensure that those guys know that their history if they vote for this. But the other thing you've got to do is you have got to get to all those people in rural areas and let them understand that the rural clinics, a lot of the rural hospitals are being gutted. But those rural clinics, those rural doctors, the only reason you have them is because of Medicaid. A large percentage of people in rural areas are on Medicaid. I repeat, a large percentage of Americans, mostly in red states again, mostly Republicans, they are very dependent on Medicaid. So when you hear they're trying to not balance the budget, can't do that. When they're trying to move around dollars and use, notice the key words that Kennedy is using: value base, in savings accounts. Your savings account could never cover something catastrophic. Think about all the keywords that they're using there. Savings account, value base. Most Americans want private insurance. Again, if they throw everything to the private sector, the government washes its hands off of it, and the private sector does what it does best to you: screws you. Again, they're coming after your Medicare and your Medicaid. And Cassidy and Kennedy just told you that. Cassidy and Kennedy just told you that. Wake up. Be woke.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.